vamos a explicarlo. Muy buenos días. Muy bien. Bueno, queremos reiterarle las excusas por este involuntario retraso. Hemos experimentado razones de fuerza mayor que nos han impedido cumplir el compromiso en la hora original al cual las y los habíamos citado. Afortunadamente hemos logrado resolver esa dificultad. Sin embargo, insisto, les transmitimos nuestras más profundas excusas y damos paso finalmente al lanzamiento, esta conferencia de prensa y lanzamiento del documento emblemático anual de la CEPAL, la inversión extranjera directa en América Latina y el Caribe 2025. Sean muy bienvenidas y bienvenidos a esta conferencia de prensa. Saludamos a las y los presentes aquí en la sala Celso Furtado de nuestra sede principal en Santiago de Chile y a los periodistas que presencial y virtualmente nos acompañan a través de nuestras diferentes plataformas, Webex, a quienes están conectados por esa vía, el sitio especial de nuestra transmisión, live.cepal.org, el sitio web de la CEPAL, www.cepal.org, además de nuestras cuentas en X, YouTube y Facebook. La presentación de este documento será realizada por el secretario ejecutivo de la CEPAL, don José Manuel Salazar-Xirinachs, y el director de la División de Desarrollo Productivo y Empresarial de nuestra institución, don Marcos Ginás, principal responsable de este informe. Se encuentran además acompañándonos en este lanzamiento doña Cecilia Plotier, jefa de la Unidad de Inversiones de la División de Desarrollo Productivo y Empresarial, y los funcionarios de la misma división, Andrea Laplane, Tanner Boayolí y Leandro Cabello. A ellos se suman además el director de la División de Recursos Naturales de la CEPAL, Martina Vélez, y el jefe de la Unidad de Recursos No Renovables de esa división, Mauricio León. Nos acompañan además en sala directores de nuestra institución, colegas también de CEPAL y del Sistema de Naciones Unidas, y como les decía, además, colegas de la prensa que nos han acompañado en esta ocasión. Luego de la presentación, por supuesto, abriremos el paso a la ronda de inquietudes que nos han hecho llegar.
Questions that we have already received from our journalists. We'd like to remind everyone from the media to please send, during the presentation, to send their written questions or to the WebEx chat or to the email address, conferenciaprensa@org. Mr. José Manuel Salazar-Xirinachs. Thank you. And I'd like to thank all the journalists and people who are connected and for your patience for this delay. This year we're publishing the 30th edition of this report. It is the 30th anniversary of this report regarding foreign direct investment in Latin America and the Caribbean. Since 1995, it is a series that on an annual basis discusses the main trends of FDI. This topic is of great importance for development because both the incoming investments and the outgoing investments of countries may contribute to productive development, to creating quality jobs, and therefore to the growth and economic transformation thanks to the introduction of new technologies, strengthening of productive capabilities. It is important to say that although the evolution of foreign direct investment flows offers valuable information, it should not be interpreted in isolation as a reflection of the economic performance and social performance of countries. However, important, of course, but it's just one of the dimensions that must be considered, borne in mind to understand the development dynamics. It's just like the discussion beyond GDP to have a full understanding of development. You need to go beyond foreign direct investment to be able to understand the full extent of development. A second aspect, an introduction also, is that the international context today marked by increasing uncertainty, geopolitical stresses, tariff measures in evolution, and a reconfiguration of world value chains increases the importance of analyzing foreign direct investment flows, because those flows reflect a very important dimension of the new geopolitics scenario in the redefinition of globalization that we're going through. And the third item, although the report focuses on trends of 2024, and it is in 2025 when we've seen a deepening of the geopolitical tensions and the disruptions. These stresses and tensions were already noticeable regarding foreign investment last year, 2024, and even from years prior. Before proceeding, I'd like to thank the whole team that worked on preparing this report, and the name has been already mentioned. But as I say, the report is developed by the Business and Productive Division led by Marco Ginas. And this year was a strong collaboration with the Natural Resources Division led by Martina Vélez, who prepared Chapter 2 regarding critical minerals. And so, by way of context regarding the challenges for development in the region, I'd like to remind you that at ECLAC, we've been insisting that we see Latin American countries in the Caribbean into three traps: that high inequality, lack of growth, and low social cohesion. And the third one related to lower institutional capabilities. And under that light, foreign direct investment is a very important component of total investment, of course. And it is also a very important path for several key development processes: technology transfer, global value chains, sophistication, productive sophistication, and all of this for structural development, that is to say, for productive transformation of the economies and increased productivity. And all of this is an essential part of what is needed to get out of that first trap of low growth capacity. From ECLAC, we've been insisting on the idea of improving these policies in the region under a new vision of these policies, in which we see the attraction of foreign direct investment as a very important component of that vision and of productive development. A key element of this new growth strategy that we are proposing is the need to prioritize efforts in drivers. ECLAC has proposed 14 of these driver sectors, which is a mix of industrial, service, and essential sectors for sustainability, such as renewables, electromobility, circular economy, and others. The dynamic of these driving sectors is influenced by the cross-cutting trend of relocation of production chains that has been deepened because of the new geopolitical conditions today. It's a topic that has gained much more momentum right now. In most of these sectors, foreign direct investment may play a key role to contribute to investment, job creation, competitiveness, dynamics of the sector, as well as the integration of the sector to regional and world value chains. So two of the chapters of the report that we are launching today address trends, challenges, and opportunities in two sectors: energy transition, with a special focus on mining and critical minerals, and digital transformation. In this context, therefore, we'd like to highlight several messages. The first one is that we are in a world of uncertainty that has consequences on investment flows. In 2024, foreign direct investment worldwide fell by 11%. And what's really important is that it is not getting to those sectors that need it the most in order to make progress towards achieving sustainable development goals. High levels of conflict and heightened uncertainty are holding back investment decisions worldwide, or at least are a deterrent. Second, in Latin America and the Caribbean, foreign direct investment grew in 2024, which is a good news, but that growth was coupled with an important concentration, both geographical as sectoral. One of the trends that we see is that the project announcements grew due to mega projects in hydrocarbons, while renewable energies that had lost some ground are losing part of that share. We'll take a look at that in detail. Third, the region has a huge potential to grow regarding critical minerals, but it's facing significant challenges to tap into that potential. For example, Latin America and the Caribbean attracts for direct investment in critical minerals, except lithium, and the region exports little value added. In order to fully take advantage of this opportunity, it is key to better align foreign investment attraction policies with productive development policies. And the fourth and last message, in summary, emerges from digital transformation, analyzing chapter number 3 in the report, and it is that digital transformation has a major opportunity to address the structural development traps in the region, but also entails risks of expanding the existing gaps. Foreign direct investment connected to digital technologies is concentrated in a few countries, and the region has a low share in world flows. So, in order to fully take advantage of this opportunity, more proactive and more comprehensive public policies are required that will strengthen the conditions and the access to enabling conditions throughout the region. These 5 sections are the content that we have prepared for today's presentation. There are 3 chapters. First, we are going to provide a brief overview of foreign direct investment flows. Second, I will offer the floor to Marcos Dinas to present the overview of foreign direct investment in Latin America and the Caribbean. Then the 2 overviews, the regional and worldwide, will be chapter 1. Third, we'll offer the floor to Martina Veleza to present a summary of chapter number 2 that analyzes the trends and challenges and opportunities of direct investment in critical minerals. Fourth, we're going to present the contents of chapter number 3 regarding digital transformation, and we will close with some final thoughts. This chart introduces foreign direct investment inflows based on official information reported by countries through their balances of payment for the world and for specific countries. As you can see, worldwide official flows of FDI amounted to 1.5 trillion in 2024. This is a drop of 11% compared to 2023, as you can see in the first 2 columns. But it is really important to notice, we see it in the detail of the report, that drop is one excluding flows to European financial centers such as Luxembourg. If you include those financial flows, the result is different. In fact, it's the opposite, because it shows an increase of 4% regarding flows of 2024 compared to 2023, but we rather exclude those financial flows to focus more on actual flows.
Having a look at the next of the graph, we see that the FDIs have behaved unequally between different regions and countries. The US has a 19.6, almost 19% compared to 2023, and this represents 18% of the arrival of FDIs in the world. In Europe, flows have dropped by 58%, as you can see there, with significant reductions in Germany, Spain, France, Italy, Poland, and Sweden. Asia continues to be the main receiver as a region, with 40% of global flows of FDIs. At 40%, however, their receptions were reduced by 30%. There is an important change in the Asian group, because China experienced a 29% drop, which is very significant in 2024, and that represents 8% of world flows. So whilst countries in Southeast Asia registered an increase of 10% as a whole, and that forms part of this reconfiguration associated to geopolitics. In summary, without taking into consideration financial flows, foreign direct investment at a world level dropped, but there was a reconfiguration of this investment in various regions. Let's now move on to analyze the announcements of investment projects in the world. And these are announcements that enable us to determine in which direction we will find interest. If that announcement becomes reality or not, well, that is a different question. But these are the announcements at a world level, project announcements at a world level represented a large amount in 2024, is what you can see on the top line in this graph. I can't see the color, but it's a top line. Now, despite the fact that this represents a 6.5% drop, as you can see, compared to 2024, for 2024 compared to 2023, the value is 35% greater than the average of the last 10 years. The amounts are greater in Asia Pacific. If you look at this per region or per sub-regions, with a 15% decline in 2024, primarily because of the drop in China. But that is the main region in the world, the South Asia and the Pacific. And we also find a drop in projects in Europe, 15% in Europe, 41% in Africa, and a drop of 48% in the Middle East. And North America experienced the largest increase in terms of announcements, up 56% compared to 2023, driven by a 74% upswing in the US, especially in the sectors of semiconductors, electronic components, and renewable energy. And this can be interpreted as a result of the policies, industrial policies that were developed by the US via the Chips and Science Act and other legislation. On the right-hand side, you can see the announcements per sector. The sector of renewable energy continues to be most important in terms of global announcements, with 20% of the total number of announcements, despite the fact that this is a slight drop compared to 2023. We find an accelerated growth in terms of telecoms and semiconductors, with a 12 and 9% respectively in terms of the total number of announcements. That has become the second and third most important sectors that promote these announcements. Now, that is the summary, a very brief summary of trends at a global level. And now I'll offer the floor to Marco Ginas so that he can present the rest of the panorama, and especially the overview for the region. Thank you very much, Executive Secretary. And first of all, our warm greetings to all those that are present and to all those that accompany us online. Let's now move on to see what happened in terms of foreign direct investment in Latin America and the Caribbean in 2024. And here we must begin by saying that the total reception of foreign direct investment in our region increased by 7.1% compared to 2023, reaching a level of around $189 billion. Now, this reflects a lower share of foreign direct investment as a proportion of the GDP and as a proportion of investment in relation to the historical average. In 2024, foreign direct investment represented 2.8% of the region's GDP, compared to an average between 2010 and 2019 of 3.3%. And in 2024, this foreign direct investment represented 13.7% of the gross fixed capital, compared to the same average of 16.8%. Now, what was underlying that increase in terms of foreign direct investment? And let's analyze then the destination of that investment. And here we find that to a large extent, the increase in Brazil and Mexico, that together account for 61% of total FDI received by the region. That to a large extent explains the increase of foreign direct investment increase in the region, and more than compensates the drop of the other three most important countries in terms of foreign direct investment: Colombia, Chile, and Argentina, that experienced a reduction of the flow of that type of investment. And now, given the fact that we couldn't see many countries in that graph as a result of the scale that somewhat distorts the data for Brazil and Mexico, let's have a more careful look at the most important inflows greater than $1 billion and the inflows of less than $1 billion. leaving out both Brazil and Mexico. And here we see that most countries in Central America and the Caribbean received more foreign direct investment compared to the previous year, unlike what occurred in South America, with the exception of Brazil. Secondly, this increase in FDIs is also explained when we analyze the components of foreign direct investment, and especially as a result of the increase in the reinvestment of profits. As you can see, we must remember that the three components of FDIs are capital contributions, which is precisely that new investment, that greenfield investment of new companies that might approach the region. Secondly, the investment of profit, and thirdly, loans between businesses, between companies. And there, the increase is primarily due to the reinvestment of profit, whilst the capital contributions are at a minimum value since 2010. And that is why we insist upon the need for the region to improve its ability to attract FDIs, especially those capital contributions that have the greatest potential in order to promote a productive transition in the region. Thirdly, that increase in FDIs is also can be explained as from the sectorial perspective. And here I would like to mention that despite the fact that services continue to be the most important sector that receives FDIs, an important increase of FDIs de manufacturas que was received by the manufacturing sector that approaches its average share to 40% in 2024 to the average of the 2010 decade. And in addition, the increase in foreign direct investment can be explained in terms of the origin of that investment. And here I would like to highlight that the US continues to be the main point of origin of that foreign direct investment received in our region, followed by Europe, and thirdly, in third place, foreign direct investment, which is intra-regional in nature. And here it's worthwhile mentioning that China represented around 2% of the total investment that was received by our region, a value that could be underestimated precisely to the extent that the measurement of FDI that we have refers to the most immediate point of origin, and therefore we could be receiving Chinese investment via other countries, via certain tax havens that are used to transfer that investment. But that can also be explained by the fact that a lot of that FDI from China is via mergers and acquisitions that take place abroad and are not necessarily reflected in inflows in our region. Let's now analyze the investments announcements. As mentioned by the Executive Secretary, these are different to the real inflows, but this announcements provide us with a lot of information and also about the perspectives or the prospects of foreign investments in the future in our region. And here we would like to highlight that unlike the drop at a world level that was also already mentioned by the Executive Secretary, the amounts of announcements of FDIs increased significantly, around 40% in the region, primarily resulting from the increase in some countries. And here it is worthwhile highlighting the case of Brazil, Mexico, and Argentina that experienced a significant increase, primarily as investments by Shell and GPF in the gas field in Vaca Muerta. And fossil fuels explained a significant part of these increases via mega projects, not only in Argentina, but also in Mexico and in Guyana, whilst there were fewer announcements in renewable energy projects and in the automobile industry. It's worthwhile highlighting that the carbon, oil, and gas sectors again came in first place, displacing the renewable energy sector to the second place, whilst in the rest of the world, the renewable energy sector is indeed the most important sector when it comes to investment announcements. And we can see how during the recovery of announcements following the pandemic, there was a reduction of sectors that are intensive in terms of technology, and that is of concern to us from the viewpoint of productive development to the extent that we would like to see FDIs or greater or more sophisticated and more diversified FDIs. And to conclude, let us refer a little bit to foreign direct investment, the outflows of FDIs. Here, companies in the region that invest abroad, that we also called the trans-Latin companies, increased their investment abroad by 50%. And it's especially interesting to highlight the case of Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, and Chile that are leaders with this type of foreign outflows of FDIs. And this is a good news in terms of the outflows of FDIs to the extent that this expansion of trans-Latin companies can support the productive transformation of the region to the extent that that investment may become a channel to acquire knowledge and technology, and also to generate a whole network of the provision of services as from the region. And along those lines, we find that most of the announcements of trans-Latin companies, their destination was countries in the region, and that is something that can be interpreted as a possibility for a regional productive integration that has been so difficult to achieve. And now I'll offer the floor to my colleague Martina Vélez to present the third part of this presentation. Thank you, Marco. This chapter highlights the evolution of foreign direct investment in the mining sector in the region. And there is an increase in and focuses on critical minerals because there is a greater interest in precisely in that. As shown in the map, the region has several of these critical minerals. First of all, copper, with Chile and Peru as the key stakeholders, not only at a regional but also at a worldwide level. Secondly, lithium, again with Chile as one of the main stakeholders, followed by Argentina, Brazil, and Bolivia. But we're not only talking about these minerals. The region also has bauxite, cobalt, nickel, graphite, and one of the star products lately, which is rare earth. Now, an aspect that has to be taken into consideration when we analyze this sector is that having the reserve of minerals does not necessarily imply the production of minerals. So there are a whole series of technological and institutional requirements, and also dealing with related to architecture, which is as important as the country's geology in order to determine the feasible and technical and financial feasibility of these projects. And this can be is illustrated in the next slide. Only in the case of lithium and copper, the proportion that Latin America represents in terms of global reserves is related to the proportion that both Latin America and the Caribbean represent in terms of global production. In all other critical levels at the critical minerals that the region has, the difference is very important. What is very eloquent here is a case of rare earths, which is explained by the situation in Brazil. Brazil presently has 23% of proven reserves of rare earth in the world, only second to China, but does not explain more than does not represent more than 0.5% of global production.
The next slide shows the evolution of Latin America's share in production and export of critical minerals in the region. Critical minerals production in the region grew significantly in this century, but it did that at a lower pace compared to other mining regions. So as it can be seen in the chart on to the left, in each one of the critical minerals that the region has lost share vis-a-vis the world production. Something similar happens in terms of exports, with the exception of copper and lithium in those two circles there. That this difference is not only due to the fact that the region did relatively better regarding copper and lithium, but several copper and lithium producing countries could export those materials to a higher degree of value added. A distinctive characteristic of exports of critical minerals in Latin America and the Caribbean is, in comparison to other mining regions, its low level of value added. Let's go to the discussion of foreign direct investment inflows. This chart shows the evolution, according to official information, of inflows due to FDI into mining in the region during the last 20 years. Although this source doesn't distinguish critical minerals from overall minerals, but we can see is how as of the pandemic, in spite of the recovery regarding FDI inflows in the region, these inflows do not achieve the historical maximum level that took place in 2012. This doesn't happen in other regions that are also specialized in the mining industry. And it is consistent not only with production information that we presented before, but with information provided by investment announcements that we're going to discuss on the next slide. It is important in this sector to discuss the investment announcements, especially because that's how we can distinguish critical minerals from other minerals. We were able to identify for the last 20 years more than 8,600 investment announcements that were focused on mining. Of these 8,600, more than 1,950 happened in Latin America, the Caribbean, and they come from 4 different origins, mostly Canada, the UK, China, and Australia, in that order of precedence. They're highly concentrated in a few countries. More than 80% of those announcements are explained by investments or the investment announcements focused on Peru, Chile, Brazil, and Argentina. Among those announcements, more than 40% already account for critical minerals. Now, what we wanted to show in the chart is that once again, if we look at the long-term evolution of these announcements, you see a relative slowing down. If we look at the first 2 columns accounting for what has happened in the copper, nickel, and zinc block, the investment announcements focused on these minerals lose weight in the overall announcement context in terms of announcing investments in these minerals compared to other regions. The exception again is lithium, which is in the last column, where it is labeled as others. In summary, so far, before entering into the policy side, the region has remained a main actor in the field of critical minerals, of course. However, both in terms of production as well as in terms of foreign direct investment attraction, has not been able to keep up with other specialized regions, specialized in mining. And also, mining exports and exports of critical minerals in the region compared to other regions, not only developed but also developing regions, show a lower level of relative value added. Now, this limited productive diversification regarding mining seems to highlight some lack of articulation between the foreign direct investment attraction instruments that in the region are mostly focused on tax stability commitments and other productive development policies. But this is not what happens in other countries with a strong mining tradition, such as Australia, Canada, Indonesia, and South Africa. In this chapter, we are presenting the main results of a study regarding productive development policies in these countries vis-a-vis mining. Of course, there's no time now to delve into details now, but just to underscore that in the most successful cases that are specifically Canada and Australia, they are betting on developing specialized vendors, and that is their diversification strategy. They are strongly relying on public investment on R&D, on exploration and geological sciences, and the creation of technology centers devoted to supporting the development of equipment and specialized services industry, and last but not least, and also including the promotion of cluster initiatives and the promotion of multi-stakeholder dialogue with a strong presence of indigenous communities in Canada and Australia. They have significant indigenous populations that are actively engaged in all deliberations regarding policies in the industry. What these countries do, Australia and Canada, in terms of their productive development policies, is not is not different from what ECLAC has called um, strengthening technical, operative, political, and prospective capabilities. What Australia and Canada do by supporting science and technology and supporting these technology centers and supporting participatory governance is that. That's why in the last section of this chapter, what we intend to do is to identify a number of technical, operative, political, and prospective capabilities that could strengthen the countries in our region to improve the social, environmental, and economic impact of foreign direct investment that we see in this industry. Just as an illustration for the benefit of time, just to say that in terms of technical capabilities, it would be good to strengthen the generation of geoscientific information, including the strengthening of geological services in our countries in terms of operative capabilities, strengthening regulatory and enforcement capabilities, especially in the environmental field, in terms of political capabilities, to strengthening participatory governance, especially strengthening consultation mechanisms for indigenous peoples. This is expressed in further detail in that chapter. In short, what the chapter proposes, we can say that Latin America and the Caribbean have significant reserves of critical minerals, but it has not been able to translate all that potential into a larger production. It also has a significant productive capabilities in mining in general, but also in critical minerals, but has not been able to translate all of that potential into larger added value. Both of those two weaknesses could be addressed by developing TOPP, technical, operational, policy, and prospective capabilities in the field of mining management and productive development capabilities related to mining management. The cases of Australia and Canada show that such policies are not only compatible with attracting foreign direct investment to the sector, but also can strengthen it or enhance it. And with that, I'll offer the floor to you again. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Martin. Let's go now finally to discuss foreign direct investment and digital transformation regarding trends, challenges, and opportunities for the region. And as the Executive Secretary mentioned, we've been insisting on this idea that digital transformation can help the region escape these three development traps that the region is facing. And here we can see foreign direct investment and digital investment as a catalyst of that digital transformation, as long as it could allow for the digitalization of traditional sectors. It could strengthen our ability to offer digital technologies from the region, but also could enable the strengthening of our infrastructure in the digital realm. Now, tapping into these effects will depend significantly on the absorption capacity of the recipient economy and the enabling conditions, and that's why we insist on the role that public policies should play, particularly digital policies, productive development policies, and the attraction of foreign direct investment efforts, looking precisely to articulate all those policies comprehensively. What's happening in the world regarding foreign or digital investment? This type of investment has grown, has increased worldwide, particularly 6 sectors that we analyzed in this chapter, such as the digital sector, telecommunications, including not only all the whole issue of connectivity and networks, but also specifically all the topics of data centers, but also semiconductors, electronic components, the software and information technology services, consumer electronics, IT machinery and equipment. They account for 18% of total investment announcements in this period. Now, this foreign direct investment is mainly focused on a few countries, and the region has a limited share, accounting for only 7% of the total amount associated with foreign direct digital investment announcements. In the world announcements and this limited share, the digital sectors of the region have been attracting some interest. And it should be worth noting that as of 2020, there is a sustained growth of the amounts of global announcements, accounting for 15% of the total amount of projects that were announced. Also, the telecommunications sector, telecommunications lead in terms of announced capital due to the investment on data hosting and processing centers. But we should also highlight the investment that is arriving at the software and IT services, accounting for 52% of the foreign direct investment announcements, with significant capability of creating jobs as well, high quality jobs. Particularly that foreign direct investment in the digital industry has a huge potential to create jobs, but it does demand qualified human talent, particularly the software sector and IT services, as I mentioned, focuses most of its capacity in terms of this leap towards larger added value segments will require high quality human talent with the profiles and skills in digital fields. And that's why we insist in the need to articulate those talent gap identification, digital talent identification with attracting investment, productive development agendas. We've seen how the technology change has redefined the entry of new companies in the region. And in that sense, we see here in the slide how between 2015 and 2019, the main companies were precisely from that sector, the telecommunications sector, such as Telefonica, AT&T, and America Mobile. And we already see in the 2020-2024 period how the profile of those companies has changed because they are now mostly related to platforms. Allied Energy, Cloud HQ, and Amazon are the ones leading the investment announcements in the region. Although the profile of the companies has changed, the main receiving countries remain the same. And in that sense, we should highlight Mexico and Brazil that concentrate 32 and 29% respectively of the amounts announced, and together with Argentina, Chile, and Colombia, account for more than 80% of the total investment announcements in this sector. Now, in this chapter, we also conducted an analysis regarding the efforts both worldwide and also in the region regarding attracting digital investment. And we can conclude that by articulating the attraction of foreign direct digital investment with productive development policies is a shared challenge that goes beyond the boundaries of the region. We checked several countries, and we see a very heterogeneous scenario where there are different countries at different stages in developing their digital economy and in terms of institutional capability to attract investment in that sector. We see that there are several agencies that are not yet actively involved in the formulation of these investment attraction policies and initiatives. We should highlight that India, the third destination for the world, that is highlighted because of a huge market as well, but also because of a technology ecosystem, active policies, and a common qualified area for attracting investments in the sector. In terms of the analysis of the region, we should highlight the fact that we developed a online questionnaire that we apply to investment promotion agencies for 10 countries in the region, looking to analyze what were the different approaches and digital sectors that were a priority, what were the incentives and instruments that they were using, what were the initiatives that they were implemented to strengthen the digital ecosystem, what were the favorable factors and obstacles to attracting FDI, and also in general we can conclude that the investment promotion agencies in the region are facing significant resource gaps, coordination gaps, and capacity gaps that limit their strategic role in linking FDI attraction with digital transformation and productive development, and also in terms of digital transformation.
And thus, the chapter concludes by presenting 10 guidelines in order to strengthen the policies to attract FDIs to the region, focusing on this sector of the digital transformation. 10 guidelines that for the purpose of this presentation have been summarized in these 4 major categories. First of all, in terms of diagnosis and strategies, we are recommending the need to conduct an analysis of present-day capabilities, investment gaps, and the potential to attract investments, and based on that, to develop and design strategies to attract FDIs. Secondly, in terms of regional cooperation, governance, and coordination, we want to advance towards an effective coordination between digital policies, productive policies, and the efforts to attract investments via multi-stakeholder governance and multi-level governance, in addition to boosting regional cooperation in order to face up to common challenges and promote shared agendas. Here it is worthwhile mentioning that the region has a major asset within that institutional arrangement known as ECLAC, that enables us to work on the regional agenda for digital transformation that could be used for this purpose. In third place, with regard to targeting impacts and sustainability, we recommend that we focus our efforts on sectors and strategic projects with a high potential, promoting clear criteria related to the quality of the investment, and also to determine the possibility of establishing conditionalities in order to increase the effectiveness of the incentives developed within the framework of these policies. And thirdly, in terms of enabling policies and align with the previous chapter, we are putting forward the need to strengthen those technical and operational capabilities, policies, and perspectives in terms of attracting foreign direct investment. That could, in addition, enable us to improve enabling conditions in the region in terms of infrastructure, talent, and in terms of regulatory frameworks. And with that, and in order to conclude this presentation, I'll very quickly move on to a summary and to a couple of final reflections. As we have seen throughout the presentation, FDI inflows increased in the region, with signs of the impact of value chain reconfiguration, as mentioned by the Executive Secretary. However, and as I mentioned, growth is primarily due to companies that are already established, and capital contributions are at a very low historical level. And in terms of FDI project announcements, they are positive in terms of amounts, but they focus on fossil fuels, and they have what has lost weight is renewable energies and technology-intensive sectors. Thirdly, and related to the chapter presented by Martín, the sector of critical minerals represents a major opportunity for the region. However, in order to avoid becoming simply a commodity exporter, and in order to develop related value chains, we need to strengthen those TOPP capabilities in countries, and to implement productive development policies so that that include the attracting FDIs as part of the toolkit. And with regards to the digital transformation issue, we are fully convinced that the digital transformation is fundamental in order to help us to escape from these three development traps, but we need to mobilize strategic investments. And in consequence, we find that when it comes to digital FDIs, that can be a major booster of this transformation. And in order to harness its potential, we will need to coordinate that within the framework of more comprehensive productive development policies. Finally, I believe that to a large extent, and what has been something that has been present throughout this presentation, is that policies to attract and retain foreign direct investment must be understood and are understood here in ECLAC as part of a wider ranging toolkit within the framework of productive development policies. And they will be fundamental not only to escalate the investment that is received by our region, but also to maximize their impact. And secondly, the scenario of exacerbated uncertainty that has been experienced this year, in one way or another, suggests that this year will be a very difficult year in terms of foreign direct investment. And for that reason, we are putting forward the idea to strengthen capacities to analyze new trends in global interdependence and the reconfiguration of global value chains in order to increase and make better use of foreign direct investment within the framework of those productive development policies. We invite you all to read this report that we have prepared this year in detail. In fact, this presentation, we believe, does not fully reflect all the information and the wealth of the analysis included in that report. And with that, I conclude. Thank you very much. And of course, I will be paying attention to any question that may come up. We thank Marcos Ginas and Martina Vélez, of course, executive, and of course the executive secretary, José Manuel Salazar-Xirinachs. So we'll now move on to the questions section by the media that have taken part in the launch of this document of foreign direct investment in Latin America and the Caribbean 2025, an ECLAC document. The first concern that we have received is from Napelia Ramos, editor of the Reuters agency, who asks the following question. So could you discuss in greater detail the concrete measures that would have to be adopted by countries in the region in order to face up to existing trade uncertainties as a result of tariffs that have been imposed, and what, in your view, would be the countries in the region that would be most severely impacted by this US measure? Executive Secretary. Thank you very much, Natalia, for your important question. Faced with this present context derived primarily from the US trade policy, we have recommended countries to act, to be very cautious in their actions and to advance along three different lines of action. First of all, what is strategic is to diversify trade relations, strengthening links with countries, key countries and blocs such as the European Union, the Association of the Asian, China, India, countries of the Persian Gulf, Africa. And this was an important strategy before the situation, but given the difficulties in terms of gaining access to the US market and the reality of higher tariffs, this becomes an even more important strategy. And in fact, an agreement such as the agreement between Mercosur and the European Union is fundamental, and likewise other similar agreements. And secondly, to have a better regional trade integration. And there are clear incentives for that. And this would involve facilitating trade, the harmonization of regulations, the development of efforts in order to develop regional value chains, the creation of logistical corridors, and within that same logic, we find the initiative of integration between the South American government promoted by Brazil and by other countries of South America, and therefore regional integration. Thirdly, to strengthen productive development policies with this cluster approach that we have promoted. To promote association between businesses, technical training, human resources, certification of quality, productive link-ups, and so on. And fourthly, to improve prospective capabilities in the mid and long term, everything that we call anticipatory governance. That is more important than ever, to be aware of global mega trends, to understand geopolitics, in order to be clear on the priorities and to have effective strategies in place vis-a-vis this new reality. Now, which countries in the region would be the most severely impacted, which is basically the second question that you have asked. The exposure or the vulnerability of countries relies or depends on how the U.S., how important the U.S. in terms of their imports or their exports and the type of tariffs imposed by the U.S. for each product. And countries that are most severely impacted are Mexico, that where more than 80% of their exports go to the U.S. markets, and the Dominican Republic, and also Colombia, where 30 and 60% of their exports have the U.S. market as their destination. On the other hand, most of the South American countries, less than 20% of their exports go to the U.S., and in some cases even less than 10%. To date, most of the countries in the region face a tariff of 10% in the U.S. In the case of Brazil and Mexico, what has been announced is that as from the 1st of August, those tariffs will increase to 50 and 30% respectively. That is what has been announced, and we'll see what happens with the negotiations underway. In the case of Mexico, the impact of this increase is softened as a result of the fact that tariffs would only be applied to products that are exported and that are not included in the bilateral agreement between Mexico, the US, and Canada, because the US has said that it will abide by that treaty. In the case of Brazil, the new tariff that they would face in the US is high, but Brazil has a relatively low exposure to that market, because only 12% of Brazil's exports are destined to the US, compared to 28% that is sent or exported to China, and therefore this should attenuate the increase of tariffs for Brazilian exports, despite the fact that this, of course, doesn't mean that they will not suffer an impact, but compared to other countries, it won't be as high. The US has also announced a 50% increase of tariffs to their imports of copper as from the 1st of August. And if this becomes a reality, that will above all impact Chile, which is the main supplier of refined copper to the US with a 35% share. It's important to notice that the US relies heavily on copper imports because 50% of their consumption of this product is by imports, and the expansion of local production would take several years. It's something which is sophisticated and complex that is not achieved overnight. And if that becomes a reality, the increase of tariffs in the US, well, Chile could send more or export more copper to other markets. Now, compared to other countries in the region, the US government has announced informally that the tariffs would increase from 10 to 15 or 20%, but that measure has not yet become a reality, and therefore the situation is very dynamic. And over the next few weeks, we will be in negotiations that are underway with other countries. So it's difficult to be much more concrete when we answer these questions, but this is the situation.
Thank you very much. We'll now address Carmen Esquivel's question from Agencia Prensa Latina, that is here with us. Carmen has asked what could be the impact on the region in the tariff announcements of 50% on copper for the region, and how, in the middle of all this international turbulence, what are the advantages or disadvantages for the countries in the region regarding foreign investment? What should the region do to attract more investment? Carmen Esquivel, Prensa Latina. Thank you, Carmen. Well, regarding this question about copper, the main focus are the potential impacts on Chile, because it is the main exporter. It exported 43 billion worth of copper in 2023. Of that amount, 39.7% or 40% came from refined copper. The United States is a destination of 27% of this refined copper exports. No more than 10% of total exports of Chilean copper exports. And in that context, according to Capital Economics, that could reduce GDP by 0.2% in 3 years. So that is one estimate that one would have to look at carefully. There could be others, but just to give you some perspective. Well, it is less obvious that tariff could affect mining foreign flows in Chile. But first of all, investment on mining have a very long time horizons. There's no improvisation that in terms of from 1 year to the next. So the impacts would take a while. And secondly, Chile has other export destinations. Its main markets would be China, so production could be redirected, and the global demand forecasted for the coming year. So there's a justification there to keep the investment momentum. Also, according to the US, 65% of the refined copper imported by the US came from Chile, so the United States relies on Chilean copper, and substituting it requires significant investments that will take time. So that could happen. And it's also Chile and the US have a free trade agreement, and the Chile keeps a commercial deficit with the US, and this added to the importance of Chilean refined copper supply may have an impact on negotiations, so Chile can have an equivalent treatment considering the mutual interest that exists in trade between the US and Chile. What advantages or disadvantages of the countries in terms of investment, and what should be done in order to attract more investment? Well, we discussed a lot in the presentation. Latin America and the Caribbean is a region with several advantages for foreign direct investment, but that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that we cannot improve significantly. We said that in 24, the region accounted for 12.5% of the world value of inflows, or FDI. It's interesting if we compare that to trade, because we account for 6% of world trade, but almost 13% of foreign direct investment inflows. That's interesting. And as we said, in 2024, foreign direct investment inflows grew, whereas others in other parts of the world, they were reduced. There's a very heterogeneous landscape among countries. In terms of the benefits for the receiving economies, well, there's the whole capacity building for industry, mining, renewables in all these sectors, such as communications, digital transformation, is a one of the main mechanisms to be part of world value chains, and in terms of productive policy development to develop local vendors and industrial chains. But there's room for improvement, and that's part of the main message of this report. That's why this emphasis on not only having this attraction approach, but the task after the attraction, which is the connection with the productive development policies, development, etc. Well, and maybe just concluding, because this is a topic that we've been emphasizing. We emphasized it in the presentation. This whole issue of improving TOPP capabilities. And examples of that, these are guidelines to that, as we saw in the chapter related to that. So guidelines are slightly different depending on the industry and the topic, but strengthening institutional capabilities, those that are in charge of managing foreign direct investment. This doesn't happen spontaneously. It does require focalized and strategic efforts, aligning management policies with productive development policies, prioritizing markets and sectors, strengthening of human talent training. That is key. Once again, this is not something spontaneous. Wherever the talent is, That's where investments go. And in order to keep that virtuous circle running, you need to keep on creating the necessary talent. Otherwise, it's a obstacle to growth. Strengthening all aftercare services, once the most difficult, well, it's not the most difficult task just to attract. We can go on and on with an endless list of 10 guidelines that we have mentioned. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, secretario ejecutivo. Es ahora el turno de Yolanda.
Yolanda Morales from El Diario El Economista, Mexico, who has sent the following. Mexico is experiencing an important reinvestment growth. How to understand that? Why companies that are here are willing to expand, and we're not able to build new projects. And also, what's behind the pause in investment that is seen this year? Internal factors such as the judiciary power reform may be discouraging the entry of productive capitals. Yolanda Morales, El Economista, Mexico. I understand that Marcos Zinas will address that question. Thank you, Guido, and thank you, Yolanda Morales, for that interesting question. As to the first part of your question, we should highlight that in 2024, foreign investment inflows totaled more than $45 billion in Mexico, which accounts for 48% more than what was observed in 2023. And as we mentioned during the presentation, this figure places Mexico in the second place in terms of destinations in Latin America and the Caribbean, with 24% of all the investments. In fact, if we break it down by investment component, profit reinvestment accounted for most of the inflows with 63%, followed by intercompany loans, and both components grew, whereas capital inflows were reduced compared to 2023. The increase in profit reinvestment can be seen somehow as a good news, a show of trust of transnationals that are present already in Mexico, because the decision to reinvest in the country suggests a perception of a favorable business where there's good profitability. So it's not something negative, but precisely a show of long-term commitment with the Mexican economy. Now, the drop regarding capital imports is connected to this international economic context of more cautious on the part of the investors, mainly driven by the increased uncertainty that we have been exposed. In that sense, this was not necessarily only affecting Mexico. There are other countries in the region that experienced reduced capital imports. It is worthwhile mentioning that 2024 announced foreign direct investment projects for $43.4 billion, which accounts for 30% more than in 2023. And also, as of 2020, the average amount of announcements has grown by 13% compared to the average of the decade of 2010. So therefore, we see that new projects could become a reality in the near future, which will mean significant inflows to the balance of payments. Just to close this, the first part of the answer, we do believe that both the attractiveness of Mexico in terms of foreign direct investment, as well as the impact of this investment, will grow as Mexico is able to articulate or link to a better extent their foreign direct investment attraction measures with that Mexico plan, which is the new productive development policy of the country. As to the second part of the question, it is worthwhile mentioning that in the case of Mexico, the ECLAC report, as it was mentioned, covers the 2024 figures. And we did not see any pause, or as I've mentioned, or any increase in foreign direct investment in Mexico in the previous year. Now, as we have seen, exacerbated uncertainty that we are experiencing this year possibly may be having an impact, a negative impact on foreign direct investment flows this year. We have collected some information from the Bank of Mexico showing that foreign direct investment inflows in the first quarter of 2025 amounted to $21.3 billion, which accounts for 21% less compared to what happened in the same period for the previous year. Although it is clear that the very high volatility of foreign direct investment figures comparing years doesn't allow to actually extract conclusions regarding the annual results only with the information for a quarter. Anyway, the data should be placed in a historical context, and in that sense, that piece of information accounts for 65% of the total that was received annually in the 2010 decade, and therefore we are here experiencing high numbers given the historical. In that sense, the challenges of that international context, Mexico could remain an attractive destination for investments. The country's economic stability, competitive advantages, how sound their investment and trade agreements are, and as long as it can be linked to a productive development or a Plan Mexico that is able to articulate all these efforts, we believe Mexico can continue being an attractive destination for investment. Thank you. It is the time to address the Candida Acosta from Dominican Republic. We'll try to address in a summarized fashion the many questions that she sent. Question: considering the Dominican Republic as a country with the highest level of FDI in Latin America, what recommendations does ECLAC offer for those investments to translate into local well-being? What is ECLAC's suggestions regarding the receiving of capitals in the foreign investment law? What is the position of the Dominican Republic in terms of investment projections for 2025 in their forecasts for 2026? And what data does ECLAC have regarding the provision of rare earth and gold deposits in Dominican Republic? Listín Diario, Candida Acosta. Thank you, Candida, for those 4 questions. Well, regarding the first one, Dominican Republic has been for 4 years receiving more than $4 billion in foreign direct investment, and this highlights this country as one of the most attractive ones and most successful if we look at it from the point of the per capita amount. This confirms the trust of investors, also the existence of a virtuous circle in which companies that are already established are sending good signals to new entrants regarding the investment climate in the country. At the same time, this suggests that the country has major opportunities to translate these flows into larger diversification, both economic, industrial chains, productivity, and local companies, and of course, quality jobs. For these flows can contribute to local well-being. These policies be linked and be part. We have repeated over and over. The productive development policies are supplementary, but I'd like to highlight also that when we say productive development policies, we see, but we should also mention the human talent development policy is absolutely key. Quality jobs and human talent is what is really attractive. The capabilities of the people have in order to work in relatively sophisticated industries.
Tenemos 3 tipos de recomendaciones.
We have 3 types of recommendations for the Dominican Republic and generally for all countries. First of all, in order to fully benefit from this, to promote productive change and technological transfer, the Dominican Republic has a high level of medical equipment possibilities, and therefore the link between, and therefore the sector of medical equipment is very sophisticated. It's not easy to work there, and to be an SME that supplies these types of equipment, because there are many technical regulations that have to be complied with. Therefore, it's not an easy job for a sophisticated and demanding sector such as this, and therefore the issue of human resources and other policies is fundamental. The second aspect is the issue of incentives to use them strategically with conditionalities aligned with productive development policies in the countries. And the third aspect would be to strengthen the institutions' regulatory, clear and efficient regulatory frameworks. And we go back to these TOPP capabilities so that institutions can indeed provide that type of services. This with regards to question. The second question with regards to repatriation of capitals, what is it that we suggest? Well, in general terms, to guarantee the free repatriation of capital, that continues to be essential in order to guarantee confidence on the part of investments. And when we find restrictions for the repatriation of capital and so on, that reduces confidence and leads to difficulties. This is not easy because there is a potential in the payments balance, but to the extent that we are able to maintain an inflow of FDIs and of financial resources, this becomes possible. What is the possibility of the Dominican Republic in terms of investment projections for 25-26? Well, we didn't really produce any or make any projections because of several reasons. It would be very speculative to do that. History does not necessarily reflect what will happen the following year, and even less so the following year. But what we can say is that the country has evidenced an increased FDIs and achieved a record figure of over $4.5 billion greater than 2023. And if we consider the investment announcements for the first 5 months of this year, we cannot see a drop. However, in 2024, there had been a reduction in the announcements of new projects, primarily in renewable energy and tourism. And therefore, the final evolution will rely on how investments are impacted as a result of this new international context. But there are many advantages, many positive assets in the Dominican Republic. And finally, how we evaluate and what information we have in terms of the reserves of gold and rare earths. Well, the Dominican Republic has an important mineral potential. It has gold reserves and also promising news in terms of rare earths. And last year, the country produced 332,000 ounces of gold in Polvo Viejo, operated by 2 mining companies. It's a mine that has around 130 million tons in terms of reserves, and it is estimated that it will be in operation until 2040. In terms of rare earth, well-reasoned studies in Sierra Bajoruco and Pedernales have identified significant concentrations of bauxite profiles that positions the Dominican Republic as a strategic potential source, a potential strategic source. And in terms of gold, as occurs with other minerals, this implies consolidating responsible mining and dealing with environmental and health aspects. However, there is an important potential in this sense looking forward. Thank you, Executive Secretary. Axel Hernandez from France Press Agency asks the following. Considering Trump's policies with his tariffs, we expect a reduction of U.S. investment in Latin America in the next few years. If this happens, could China replace the vacuum left by the U.S.? And Marcos Ginas will answer this question. Thank you very much, Axel Hernandez, for that question. And here it's worthwhile to continue to insist that considering that FDI decisions are long-term decisions, it is still early days in order to truly determine the impact of changes in U.S. trade policies. However, we must remember that historically the U.S. has been the main investor in the region, a role that has been strengthened over the past few years, and now and at present represents 38% of total investments in the region in 2024. And in terms of the announcement of projects, it is also US companies that have led these announcements. As analyzed in the report, we invite you to review that part that perhaps we didn't present in detail during our presentation. US tariffs could impact sectors geared to exports where the US market prevails, as occurs with automobiles, electronic components, industrial equipment, and medical devices. And now, in 2025, between January and May of 2025, we have analyzed announcements of foreign direct investment projects in the region. They have been reduced with over 28 billion announced until May. That represents 49% less than what was registered during the same period in 2024. And despite the fact that announcements from the US have dropped, what has also dropped with similar magnitude are the announcements from China, Spain, Japan, and South Korea. Now, whether China could replace those projects, China continues to play a limited role, especially when compared to the US when it comes to foreign direct investment in the region. In our region, China represented around 2% of FDI inflows into the region. Now, as explained, this statistics could be underestimated as a result of several reasons. However, the announcement of projects from China suggests a more limited presence compared to other origins. As from 2020, Chinese companies have announced projects in the region totaling $34 billion, which represents less than 7% of the total. Within this context, and this is something that we have said on different occasions, what will be fundamental is for the region to diversify its trade and investment relations while taking measures to strengthen its international competitiveness. And this includes, as has been reiterated by us, strengthening of its productive policies that promote innovation, and the strengthening of regional value chains and governance reforms that strengthen the confidence of investors. Thank you, Marcos Yunas. María José Núñez from the newspaper Universidad in Costa Rica sends the following questions. In the case of Costa Rica, what could be the impact of the increasing insecurity when it comes to FDIs? Is this situation already present? Could we review the benefits of fiscal benefits provided to companies as a result of FDIs? Could that lead to a reduction or to the disappearance of investment in Costa Rica? And how could Central America become attractive for FDIs as a conglomerate of countries? That is a question by María José Núñez from newspaper Universidad de Costa Rica. Secretary, thank you, María José Núñez. These are three very important questions. What could be the impact of the insecurity in terms of FDIs? Well, we would have to say that in Costa Rica, investment flows to Costa Rica have shown to be very resilient. The country has successfully positioned itself as a strategic destination for high aggregate value sectors such as modern services, corporate services, medical services. In 2024, for example, 68% of FDIs received by Costa Rica last year were in terms of manufacturing, were quite sophisticated, and it is one of the main exporters of medical devices. Now, having said this, we must mention that the confidence on the part of investors is not only based on a single factor, but rather on the whole ecosystem. In Costa Rica, this ecosystem has been built based on solid competitive skills, human capital, legal security for investors, and an export platform that is very robust. Now, this has meant that FDIs continue to flow to Costa Rica, and that it represented more than $5 billion last year, 13% greater than the previous year. Now, having said this, we cannot underestimate the challenge that insecurity and organized crime may pose, which is a question, despite the fact that present data do not evidence a shrinkage of investments attributed to this factor. In fact, there is no drop in investments. This is an issue that if it continues to grow, and if it is not catered for with the strength and with the comprehensive policies that are needed, this could erode the business climate, competitive advantages, and the good reputation of the country. Now, as from ECLAC, we believe that the strengthening of the rule of law and improves social condition and the struggle against organized crime are fundamental tasks, not only for Costa Rica, but for the whole region, because this is a trend that affects most of the countries of the region and which is of great concern for a country such as Costa Rica that has basic success on stability,
reputación como país democrático.
Talent, and good reputation for its population. This is very, very important and forms part of the attraction in a list of 10 factors of attraction factors. That the quality of life in this country is indeed one of those factors. Now, when it comes to fiscal benefits or a change or a discussion of a change in the rules of the game, we would have to mention several aspects. Incentives is one aspect, but not the only one. Clearly, fiscal incentives is something that transnational companies take into consideration in their financial models and in their calculations and investment decisions. And an abrupt change that leads to legal insecurities could impact this. And this is something that the country has discussed for quite a while now, especially when it comes to benefits in tax-free areas and tax exemptions. Costa Rica competes based on the quality and the cost of human capital. High-quality FDI has arrived, beginning with the company Intel, but that is not the beginning, but rather the symbolic value of Intel's decision in 1998. And this was not done only because of tax exemptions, but primarily as a result of other reasons, such as human talent, the stability of policies, legal security, logistics and infrastructure, and so on and so forth. And these results did not happen overnight or spontaneously, but rather as a result of attraction measures that were taken and that were very clear. However, policies have to adapt to new conditions, attraction policies together with productive development policies. And as from ECLAC, we encourage countries to move from an approach dealing with attraction to one which is wider ranging, which is productive development. And this implies that the discussion on incentives cannot only be within the framework of maintaining them, but rather on how to modernize them, how to make incentives more effective and more attractive considering the new conditions. And therefore, I would reformulate the question in terms of how we can better align these incentives with the national objective of transfer of technology, of gaining access to value chains. And Costa Rica is at a level where the issue is how to attract investments for R&D, for example, which is something much more sophisticated, which requires incentives, but that doesn't not only mean subsidies and money, but rather universities that truly that have human resources, that have PhD and master's programs and so on. And so when we talk about incentives, we're talking about that type of incentives. And also the issue of discussing these issues is fundamental. For this to be successful, we require that it has technical capabilities, a good dialogue that is predictable, that any changes in the rules may be as a result of a dialogue consulted and not something simply imposed or something surprising that impacts upon the level of uncertainty. And finally, how could Central America become attractive? Well, as a conglomeration of countries. Well, this is a very important issue that brings to the forth the discussion of the Central American integration. It is quite integrated, but in a more traditional fashion. 28% of trade is intra-regional as a percentage of the total trade. But here we find many aspects so that Central America could become a joint platform for exports, and for the attraction of investments. First of all, we have to consolidate that common market beyond simply free trade, a greater regulatory and customs harmonization to make border crossings more agile in order to move goods. We need it to be a platform. We need to move goods across borders with total efficiency and with greater security in terms of transport, the creation of economies of scale. If we have several markets of 5 or 10 million and one of 50 or 60 million inhabitants, well, that would be attractive. A second key aspect is to generate regional value chains. Intelligent specialization, which is a concept that has been developed in both Europe and in Spain, which implies a certain level of negotiation and a vision of the strengths of each country, and so that companies may position certain productive facilities in some countries or others. But again, this requires tremendous legal security and tremendous security in terms of the transport of parts, pieces, and components, and internet connectivity, for example, and also joint strategies to benefit from nearshoring and the configuration of chains. A third aspect is investment in infrastructure and regional connectivity, the issue of logistics and of energy. That is also very important because some countries have suffered from blackouts, and we know that traditional manufacturing requires certainties that there will be no power cuts, and there is a Central American interconnection, and the fact that it is efficient and that it works well guarantees that there will be no power cuts, digital connectivity, and again, I insist on the issue of human talent.
The better the human talent, the better chances of attracting better quality investment with larger added value and to ascend in value chains. Thank you. Thank you, Executive Secretary. From the same media, Universal de Mexico, two colleagues, Horacio Jimenez and Roberto Jimenez, who sent the following questions. President Trump's policies have affected foreign investment in Mexico. Where are we going as Latin America with Trump's decisions? And what is the perspective with the nearshoring announcements? Could there be a second wave of investment? Questions from Horacio and Roberto Jimenez from El Universal from Mexico. Well, thank you, Horacio and Roberto. As we say, considering that foreign direct investment decisions are in the long term, it's too soon now to mention anything, and considering that there have been announcements that then change and there have been negotiations, there's lots of uncertainty, and with the April 2nd announcement, but more recent announcements, the reaction from the financial sector and stock exchanges was not that strong. But the geographic proximity to the U.S. market, especially for countries such as Mexico, means that whatever the U.S. does and whatever they're able to negotiate, for sure, they've been able to negotiate important things, will have an important impact. We believe in reality that Mexico is very much integrated with the US and Canada in a joint production zone, and I believe that is recognized by the US, making it part of the policies, and it opens up major opportunities for Mexico besides the existence of TIMEC to align the topics and issues with the US, or at least that is the optimistic view of what could happen in the future. As to where we're going as a region, well, it is a very complex moment. From ECLAC, we have recommended caution to countries progressing in 4 types of actions: that diversifying commercial relations, the deepening regional integration, strengthening productive development policies with this clustering approach, and strengthening prospective capacities in the medium and long term, so that we can be cautious, but at the same time strategically progress and thinking of the future and thinking of geopolitics and how to navigate this complexity. what are the perspectives of the nearshoring phenomenon in Mexico after the announcement of the new tariff policy? I believe I've already answered foreign direct investment inflows of more than $45 billion. They are huge. In fact, this is an increase in 2024 of 48% compared to 2023. Since there's a reshuffling protagonism with China, a proportion of the investments in China and Asia are not only going to the US or Mexico, because a very well-positioned country in Latin America, and both to benefit from the nearshoring trend, for example, and there's a good investment environment when there's a critical mass, as Mexico has in terms of aerospace, medical devices, software, and many things. And there is clusters in Jalisco and in several states, and there's experience and an institutional infrastructure. The virtuous circles start operating in Mexico has them. So I would say that all of that to give some perspective to, well, there could be damage, yes, from the policies in the US, but there are several advantages as well, and lots of common interest between the two countries. Thank you, Executive Secretary Maria Martinez Moore from EFE. In our country, in the host country, Chile, the following questions. New investments are still stagnant in the region, reflecting the low interest of new companies to be located in Latin America and the Caribbean. What would be the reason for that, and how could the region take advantage of this context of tariff situations and geopolitical pressures to attract new companies? Maria Martinez Moore from EFE in Chile. I understand Marcos Ginas will address that question. Thank you, Maria Martinez, for that question. We've been addressing to some extent many of these elements, but just to start saying that what we see in 2024 is not stagnation, but precisely we saw an increase in foreign direct investment that arrived in the region, and particularly the growth in terms of profit reinvestment. So the companies in the region are still choosing the region to leave their capitals operating. The challenge now is to keep on expanding the opportunities that the region offers to the establishment of new investments that will help us strengthen that productive transformation. In that sense, and as we saw in the presentation, sectors such as digital transformation and critical minerals account for important opportunities that one would have to leverage,
a partir de la conjugación de esos
especially by connecting those investment efforts with other types of agendas in terms of productive development in the region. We have seen countries developing long-term strategies that have been mentioned by the Executive Secretary, such as the case of renewable energies in Chile, but also medical devices in Costa Rica, ICT services, Uruguay, just to mention a few examples. And that leads me to answer the second part of the question in terms of how could the region take advantage of this geopolitical tension context, by saying that the company location decisions do consider a variety of elements and dimensions. From ECLAC, we understand that countries in the region can still improve in articulating foreign direct investment as a strategic tool, considering productive development policies. And this means, for example, to focus on foreign direct investment attraction on those sectors that countries may prioritize as part of their development policies. So this means establishing explicit governance mechanisms to articulate the multiple stakeholders and efforts around these agendas. It also means to develop instruments that address that technology transfer and knowledge transfer additionally intending to develop local vendors for that FDI that reaches the region. And for all of them, as we have insisted, we believe governments in the region should strengthen the TOPP capabilities of the institutions that are leading the policy implementation and design.
Del país de España.
Maurice Castro from El País, Spain, with a similar question. There's the limited interest of new countries to be in our region. So what could be expected in this 2025 regarding global uncertainty and the commercial tensions? Maurice Castro, El País, Spain, Executive Secretary. Thank you, Maurice. I wouldn't say that the report shows low interest of new companies to locate and to be in the region. 2024 foreign direct investment in Latin America accounted for almost $190 billion in total, which was an increase of 7.1% compared to 2023. That is the aggregate information. What does happen, and possibly that's what you mean in your question, when you break down the growth components, you see that was mainly driven by profit reinvestment of the companies that are already established, accounting for 52% of the total and grew by 18%, and capital inflows or contributions associated to the arrival of new companies that dropped by 12%, and they were located in the second highest level. So there is that change, and this is what we commented in the report. That reflects a stagnation in attracting new stakeholders and underscores the need to strengthen attraction policies, linking them with product development strategies. But it is natural when there is a critical mass that is significant already of businesses, and as long as there is interest in optimism to reinvest, profits will be a significant component. What's happening really is companies that are growing, and they continue to expand their productive facilities and their exports from those export platforms. Undoubtedly, global uncertainty, commercial tensions, and everything we have discussed may slow down for decision investments into the future. That's why we need to redouble our efforts. Seeing this as part of the development strategies is not the only one, but it is fundamental. I believe basically with what to expect now for 2025, considering global uncertainty and commercial tensions. Well, in summary, I would say this uncertainty we see more than expecting anything to do our job. We need to roll up our sleeves and to work hard in terms of productive development policies and attracting investment, in looking at the scenario of international policy economy and thinking of alternative scenarios to take advantage of opportunities. It's not only about negotiation exercises of free trade agreements and diversification and trying to minimize the impact of tariffs from the US, but at the same time to do the job of attract investments. And the task after productive development, it's a new geopolitical world where most of what can be achieved will be based on hard work and negotiations. And for that, again, we need to have institutions that are able to work both on the external front as well as in the internal front. I'd like to thank our colleagues. I'd like to thank Executive Secretary. We have reached the time limit that we have set to address these questions. However, I'd like to consider that we have received and we will address in writing questions from Orlando Milesi from Interpress Service, Leticia Hernández Morón from El Financiero de México, Rosa María Pastrán from La Prensa Gráfica El Salvador, Julia Curado, ADP Investiga Guatemala, Carolina Barrantes from Suma Magazine from Costa Rica, Humberto Cruz from T21, Bayelín Acosta from OI, Dominican Republic, to all of them, we thank for their questions. Please be sure that we'll be delivering an answer to your questions. And unfortunately, we didn't have enough time actually to cover that here live. But we have received those questions and we will answer them. Executive Secretary, any final thought on last message as a context? No, just briefly, because we have given lots of information. Two things. Please read the report. There's lots to learn. It's very important for decision makers, for students, for the academia, for the governments. It is a report that opens up to new ideas, and it's more important than ever. Foreign direct investment flows and the impact of geopolitics. There's a change in the rules of the game to attract investments. The report from the coming year, you need to please expect it with lots of interest, because it's going to be a report that will show changes in 2025, as we know. Changes have been quite dramatic. If we already saw some signals in 2024, as we have said, what we are going to be able to report in the coming year will be significantly interesting, and even some surprises, good and bad. Thank you. Thank you very much to those of you who have been with us during this launch, particularly our colleagues from the media that allow to connect ideas and data from ECLAC to its audience. There's all the materials are already available on the digital platforms of ECLAC, and public information is available to all journalists.
Secretario Ejecutivo, muchas gracias. Tengan todos muy
Thank you all.
buenos días, donde todavía sea así. Hasta luego, nos reencontraremos pronto.